After I caught my neighbors using my hot tub without permission, I installed security cameras and discovered they were breaking into my house while I was away and stealing my jewelry, electronics, and even my husband's expensive golf clubs to sell at pawn shops. Last Saturday night at around 11 p.m., I walked into my kitchen to get some water and noticed lights flickering in my backyard. When I looked out the window, I saw 6 people sitting in my hot tub, drinking beer and laughing loudly. None of them lived in my house. I am Gianna, 45F, and my husband is Michael, 47M. We bought our current house in Denver 3 years ago specifically because it had a large deck with a built-in hot tub. The previous owners had installed a really nice jacuzzi-style tub that seats 8 people comfortably. Michael and I both work long hours. He's an accountant at a mid-sized firm and I manage a dental office, so we don't get to use the hot tub as much as we'd like, but it's perfect for unwinding on weekends. Our neighborhood has about 20 houses, all built in the 1990s with decent-sized backyards. Most of our neighbors are families with kids or older couples who've lived here for years. We know everyone by name and wave when we see each other, but we're not particularly close with anyone. Michael and I tend to keep to ourselves. We travel frequently to visit his elderly parents in Phoenix, and we also have a small cabin we bought 2 years ago about 2 hours north of the city where we spend most of our free weekends. The neighbors directly behind us are the Jones family, David, 52M, Linda, 49F, and their twin sons Asher and Cameron, both 23M, who are seniors at the University of Colorado. The twins still live at home to save money while finishing their degrees. David works as an engineer for a construction company, and Linda teaches at the local elementary school. They seem like decent people, though Linda can be a bit nosy sometimes, always asking about our travel plans or commenting on deliveries she sees at our house. Our backyards are separated by a 6-foot wooden fence that the previous owners installed. There's a gate between our properties that was put in when both families had dogs, though neither of us is pets now. The gate has a simple latch on our side and stays unlocked because we sometimes borrow tools from each other or David helps Michael with yard work occasionally. About 6 months ago, Michael started a new position at his accounting firm that requires him to travel to client sites more frequently. He's usually gone 2 or 3 days each week, leaving Tuesday morning and coming back Thursday evening. I don't mind being alone, I actually enjoy the quiet time to read or catch up on shows Michael doesn't like. But it does mean our hot tub sits unused most weeknights. The first sign something was off came about 2 months ago. I arrived home from work on a Wednesday evening and noticed the hot tub cover was slightly askew. Michael had been out of town since Tuesday morning, and I hadn't used the tub in over a week. I figured maybe the wind had shifted it or the automatic cover system had malfunctioned. The next morning, I straightened it and thought nothing more about it. A few weeks later, I found an empty beer bottle on our deck. It was wedged between 2 planters near the hot tub. Michael doesn't drink beer, he's strictly a wine person, and I rarely drink alcohol at all. I assumed someone had thrown it over the fence, maybe from a party next door, and I tossed it in the recycling bin. Then last month, I came home early from work on a Thursday because I had a dentist appointment that got cancelled. As I was pulling into our driveway, I saw someone quickly close the gate between our yard and the Joneses' yard. The person moved too fast for me to see who it was, and by the time I got out of my car and walked to the backyard, nobody was there. The hot tub cover was in place and everything looked normal, but I noticed the area around the tub was wet even though it hadn't rained in days. I mentioned these incidents to Michael, but he thought I was overreacting. He pointed out that we live in a safe neighborhood and maybe I was just noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. He suggested that the beer bottle could have been there for weeks, and the wet spots might be from the sprinkler system or condensation from the tub's heating unit. Last Saturday was different because Michael was supposed to be in Albuquerque for a client meeting that had been scheduled months in advance. I had planned to spend the evening reading and going to bed early. Around 10:30 p.m., I was in our bedroom when I heard voices and laughter coming from outside. At first, I thought it might be the Jones having people over in their backyard, which wouldn't be unusual for a Saturday night. But when I went to the kitchen to get water about 30 minutes later, I looked out the window and saw the lights from our hot tub were on. The tub has LED lighting that cycles through different colors, and I could see the blue and green glow reflecting off the deck. I immediately knew something was wrong because neither Michael nor I had turned on the tub. I turned off the kitchen lights so I could see better without being noticed. That's when I saw 6 people in our hot tub, 4 men who looked college-aged and 2 women around the same age. They had beer bottles and what looked like a cooler sitting on our deck. I recognized Asher and Cameron Jones immediately, and one of the women looked familiar, though I couldn't place her right away. The other 3 people were strangers. I stood at the window for about 10 minutes, watching them. They were clearly comfortable, acting like they owned the place. One of the men had brought a waterproof speaker and was playing music at a volume that would have annoyed me if I'd been trying to sleep. They were talking loudly and laughing, and I could see empty bottles accumulating on the deck. My first instinct was to march outside and confront them immediately. But I realized that might not be the safest approach. There were 6 of them and only 1 of me, and they'd been drinking. Instead, I grabbed my phone and started recording video from the Kit Jones window. The angle wasn't perfect, but I got clear footage of Asher and Cameron in the tub along with their friends. I also took photos with the flash turned off, zooming in as much as possible to get recognizable faces. The more I watched, the more upset I became. These people were using our property like it was their own private party spot. They had obviously done this before. They knew exactly how to operate the hot tub controls and where we kept the pool chemicals. Around midnight, I saw them start cleaning up. They collected all their bottles and cans, turned off the music, and even wiped down the areas where they'd set their drinks. Asher used a net to scoop some leaves out of the water, and Cameron adjusted the chemical dispenser before they turned off the lights. They were being methodical about leaving no trace, which told me this was definitely not their first time. After they left through the gate to the Joneses' yard, I went outside to inspect the area. The deck was dry where they'd wiped it down, and the hot tub looked exactly as we'd left it. If I hadn't seen them with my own eyes, I would never have known anyone had been there. This explained why Michael and I hadn't noticed anything obvious before. They were clearly experienced at covering their tracks. I didn't sleep much that night, alternating between anger at the violation of our property and frustration that this had apparently been going on for months without us knowing. I kept thinking about all the times we'd come home from trips and noticed small things that seemed off: the gate latch positioned differently, the deck chairs moved slightly, the hot tub temperature higher than we'd left it. Sunday morning, I called Michael in Albuquerque and told him what had happened. He was shocked and asked me to send him the videos and photos immediately. He wanted to cut his business trip short and come home, but I convinced him to finish his meeting since I had already documented everything and the Jones twins were likely sleeping off their hangover anyway. Michael got home Sunday evening, and we spent 2 hours going through the evidence and discussing our options. We decided our first step should be talking directly to David and Linda Jones before involving anyone else. We've lived next to them for 3 years without any major problems, and we hoped they would handle the situation appropriately once they knew what their sons had been doing. Monday morning, I called Linda and asked if she and David could come over that evening to discuss something important. I didn't give specifics over the phone, but I mentioned it concerned both our properties. Linda sounded curious but agreed to come by around 7 p.m. after David got home from work. When they arrived Monday evening, Michael and I had prepared what we wanted to say. We invited them to sit in our living room and Michael started by explaining that we needed to discuss their son's activities in our backyard. David immediately looked uncomfortable, and Linda's face went pale. Michael showed them the videos and photos on his tablet. Linda covered her mouth with her hand when she saw Asher and Cameron clearly visible in our hot tub. David shook his head and asked how long this had been happening. We explained our suspicions about the past few months and the evidence we'd noticed. Linda kept apologizing and saying she had no idea the twins were doing this. She mentioned that Asher and Cameron often had friends over on weekends and that she'd assumed they were just hanging out in their own backyard. David was quieter but looked embarrassed and angry. We asked if they had given their sons permission to use our hot tub, and both parents said absolutely not. David explained that Asher and Cameron had never even mentioned our hot tub to them. Linda added that if the twins had asked, she would have told them to ask us directly rather than just helping themselves. The conversation lasted about an hour. David and Linda promised to confront their sons immediately and make sure it never happened again. They offered to pay for any additional chemicals or maintenance costs, and David said he would install a lock on the gate between our properties if we wanted. We told them we appreciated their response but needed time to think about next steps. Michael mentioned that we were considering security cameras and other measures to protect our property. We didn't want to end the evening on a completely negative note, but we made it clear that this situation had damaged our trust and sense of security in our own home. After the Jones left, Michael and I discussed whether we thought their reaction was genuine. Linda seemed truly shocked and apologetic, but we both noticed that David appeared less surprised than his wife. It made us wonder if he had suspected something but hadn't wanted to deal with it. The next morning, I was getting ready for work when I heard raised voices from the Joneses' backyard. Through our bedroom window, I could see David talking animatedly to Asher and Cameron on their patio. I couldn't make out specific words, but David's body language made it clear he was not happy. The twins mostly stood there looking down at the ground while their father spoke. That evening, Asher came to our front door alone. He apologized for using our hot tub without permission and said it wouldn't happen again. He offered to do yard work or other chores to make up for what he'd done. I thanked him for the apology but told him Michael and I needed to discuss things further before deciding how to move forward. Cameron never came over to apologize, which struck both Michael and me as significant. Asher had always seemed more responsible than his twin, and Cameron had a reputation in the neighborhood for being less mature despite being the same age. Update 1: Asher and Cameron Jones broke into our house while we were out of town, and now the police are involved. Michael and I decided to install security cameras after the hot tub incident. We had a system put in 2 weeks ago with cameras covering our backyard, front door, and the gate between our property and the Joneses. The installation company recommended motion-activated cameras that sent alerts to our phones, which seemed perfect since we travel frequently. Last Thursday, Michael and I drove to our cabin for a long weekend. We left Thursday afternoon and planned to return Sunday evening. This was our first trip since installing the cameras, so we were curious to see if they would detect any unusual activity while we were gone. Friday morning around 10 a.m., I got a motion alert on my phone while Michael and I were having coffee on the cabin's deck. The alert showed someone opening the gate between our yard and the Joneses' yard. I expected to see Asher or Cameron, but instead the camera caught Linda Jones walking through our backyard toward our house. I watched the live feed as Linda tried our back door, found it locked, then walked around to the side of our house where there's a basement window that's partially hidden by shrubs. She spent several minutes examining the window before returning to her own yard through the gate. I showed Michael the footage immediately. We were both confused about why Linda would be trying to get into our house. Michael suggested maybe she was checking on our property as a neighborly gesture, though that didn't explain why she was testing doors and windows. About 2 hours later, we got another motion alert. This time it was Asher and Cameron coming through the gate together. They walked directly to our back door and Cameron pulled out what looked like a key. They unlocked the door and went inside our house. Michael and I just stared at the phone screen in shock. We watched the camera feed for 20 minutes, but the cameras only covered exterior areas, so we couldn't see what the twins were doing inside. Eventually, they came back outside carrying several items including what looked like bottles from our liquor cabinet and some electronic devices. Michael immediately called 911 while I continued monitoring the camera feeds. The dispatcher took our information and said they would send officers to our house right away. We started packing to drive home immediately, but the cabin is 2 hours away, so we knew the police would arrive long before us. About 30 minutes after we called 911, Asher and Cameron came back outside. They moved quickly, looking around nervously before going back into the house. They emerged again carrying more items, including what I recognized as Michael's expensive golf clubs and a box that looked like it contained my jewelry. The police arrived just as the twins were loading items into a car parked in the Joneses' driveway. We watched through the camera feed as officers approached Asher and Cameron in the driveway. Both young men put their hands up immediately and didn't try to run. Michael and I drove home as fast as legally possible. When we arrived around 1 p.m., there were still 2 police cars in front of the Joneses' house and one officer was taking photos of items laid out on their driveway. These were things that had been stolen from our house. Officer Rodriguez, who seemed to be in charge, met us at our front door. He explained that Asher and Cameron had been arrested for breaking and entering and theft. They were currently at the county jail waiting for their arraignment hearing, probably on Monday morning. The officer walked us through our house to document what had been taken. Besides the liquor and electronics we'd seen on camera, the twins had also taken cash from a drawer in our bedroom, several bottles of expensive wine from our basement, and prescription medications from our bathroom cabinet. Officer Rodriguez told us the Jones twins had a key to our back door, which explained how they got in so easily. When he asked if we had given them a key, we said absolutely not. The officer suggested they might have made a copy at some point when they had access to our house, possibly during one of their hot tub parties. This possibility made Michael and me realize how vulnerable we'd been. If Asher and Cameron had been sneaking into our backyard for months, they could have found our spare key or even taken our regular key temporarily to make copies. We always kept a spare key under a fake rock by the back door, mainly for emergencies or when service people needed access. David and Linda Jones were waiting in their driveway when we finished talking to the police. Linda was crying and kept saying she couldn't believe her sons would do something like this. David looked exhausted and older than I'd ever seen him. Linda tried to apologize, but Michael cut her off and said we weren't ready to talk about it yet. He pointed out that Linda had been on our property earlier that day, trying to get into our house, and we wanted an explanation for that too. Linda admitted she had been worried that Asher and Cameron might have hidden things in our house during their previous visits. She said she wanted to check if there was any evidence that might get them in more trouble. David looked shocked when she said this, like he was hearing it for the first time. David asked Linda what she meant by evidence, and she broke down completely. Through her tears, she explained that she'd known about the hot tub parties for weeks before we caught them. She'd seen Asher and Cameron and their friends coming and going through the gate, but she hadn't wanted to cause problems with us as neighbors. Linda said she thought the hot tub use was harmless since we were rarely home anyway. She claimed she didn't know the twins had keys to our house or were taking things from inside. But her trying to get into our house that morning suggested she suspected more than she was admitting. David looked furious with his wife. He said Linda should have told him what she knew and that they should have put a stop to it immediately. Linda kept crying and saying she never thought it would escalate to breaking and entering. Michael and I went back inside our house and left the Jones to argue in their driveway. We spent the rest of the afternoon checking every room carefully to see what else might be missing. We found that several pieces of jewelry were gone, including my grandmother's pearl necklace and Michael's watch collection. The police had recovered most of the items the twins were carrying when they were arrested, but anything taken during previous visits was probably long gone. Officer Rodriguez told us to make a complete list of missing items for the insurance claim and criminal case. That evening, David Jones came to our door alone. He said Linda was too upset to talk, but he wanted us to know how sorry he was about everything. He offered to pay for changing our locks, replacing anything that wasn't recovered, and any other costs related to the break-in. David also told us he was making Asher and Cameron move out of his house as soon as they made bail. He said they were adults and needed to face the consequences of their actions without his protection. He mentioned that Linda disagreed with this decision, which was causing problems in their marriage. Michael thanked David for the offer but said we needed to let the legal process play out before discussing any financial arrangements. We told him we were planning to press full charges and wouldn't be dropping the case. Sunday evening, we learned that Asher and Cameron had been released on bail after their parents posted bond. We saw them moving boxes and suitcases out of the Jones house into a moving truck. Neither twin looked in our direction or tried to contact us. Linda Jones spent most of Sunday crying on her front porch. Several neighbors came by to check on her, and I heard her telling them that her boys were good kids who had made a terrible mistake. She kept saying she didn't understand how things had gotten so out of hand. Michael and I had our locks changed Monday morning and installed additional security measures including door alarms and window sensors. The locksmith told us our back door lock had definitely been tampered with. There were scratches around the keyhole that suggested someone had made unauthorized copies of the key. We also discovered that our spare key was missing from its hiding spot, which confirmed how the twins had gained access to our house. They'd probably found the spare key during one of their hot tub parties and used it to make copies for future use. Update 2. The criminal case against Asher and Cameron Jones has taken an unexpected turn, and now their mother Linda is also facing charges. Asher and Cameron's trial was scheduled to begin last month, but their lawyer requested a delay to negotiate a plea deal. The prosecutor handling the case, Ms. Patterson, contacted us to discuss what kind of sentence we would find acceptable if the twins pled guilty to the charges. Michael and I met with Ms. Patterson 3 weeks ago to review the evidence and discuss our preferences. She explained that Asher and Cameron were facing multiple felony charges including breaking and entering, theft, and possession of stolen property. If convicted on all charges, they could face several years in prison. During our meeting, Ms. Patterson mentioned that the investigation had revealed some additional information we weren't aware of. She said the twins had been selling some of the items they stole from our house, and police had recovered several pieces of Michael's watch collection from a pawn shop downtown. The pawn shop records showed that Cameron had sold 3 expensive watches over the past 6 weeks, using his real ID each time. The shop owner remembered Cameron because he'd claimed the watches belonged to his grandfather who had recently passed away. This lie was documented on the pawn shop's security cameras. Ms. Patterson also told us that police had found evidence suggesting the twins had stolen from other neighbors as well. During their investigation, officers contacted several families in our neighborhood to ask if they'd noticed anything missing from their homes during times when Asher and Cameron might have had access. 2 families reported missing items. The Johnsons, who live 3 houses down from us, discovered that expensive power tools had been taken from their unlocked garage. The timeline matched a weekend when they were out of town and Asher and Cameron would have known the house was empty. The Martinez family, who lived directly across from the Jones, found that jewelry and cash were missing from their master bedroom. Mrs. Martinez remembered that Linda Jones had offered to water their plants while they were visiting family in Texas last month. Linda would have had access to their house key and could have passed it to her sons. When Ms. Patterson told us about these additional thefts, Michael and I realized the situation was much bigger than we'd thought. Asher and Cameron weren't just opportunistic college kids who'd made a bad decision, they were running a deliberate operation to steal from neighbors who trusted them. The most shocking revelation came when police searched the twins' new apartment where they'd moved after being kicked out of their parents' house. Officers found a notebook containing detailed information about various neighbors' schedules, travel plans, and security measures. The notebook included entries about our family, with notes about Michael's business travel schedule and when our house would be empty. It also contained information about at least 6 other families in the neighborhood, including work schedules, vacation plans, and notes about valuable items visible through windows. Police found entries like Martinez family, Disney trip March 15 to 22, house key under front mat and Johnson family, both work until 6 p.m. weekdays, garage usually unlocked. The level of planning and surveillance was disturbing and suggested the twins had been targeting neighbors systematically. When this information came to light, Linda Jones was arrested and charged as an accessory to theft. The police determined that she had been providing information to Asher and Cameron about neighbors' activities and travel plans. Her job at the local elementary school gave her access to family information through school records and conversations with parents. Linda's arrest happened 2 weeks ago while she was at work. Several parents at the school witnessed her being taken away in handcuffs, which caused a major scandal in the community. The school district placed her on administrative leave pending the outcome of the criminal case. David Jones came to our house the day after Linda's arrest. He looked completely broken down and could barely speak coherently. He told us he had no idea his wife was involved in the thefts and felt like he didn't know his own family anymore. David explained that Linda had been acting strangely for months, asking detailed questions about neighbors' plans and encouraging Asher and Cameron to be more social with people on our street. He said he thought she was just trying to build community relationships, but now he realized she was gathering intelligence for her son's criminal activities. The divorce papers were filed 3 days after Linda's arrest. David told us he couldn't stay married to someone who had violated their neighbor's trust so completely. He said the woman he married would never have done something like this, and he didn't know who Linda had become. Michael and I attended Asher and Cameron's plea hearing last Tuesday. Both twins pled guilty to multiple felony charges in exchange for reduced sentences. Asher was sentenced to 18 months in prison followed by 2 years of probation. Cameron received 2 years in prison and 3 years of probation because he was considered the ringleader. The judge was particularly harsh with Cameron because of the notebook and evidence showing he had planned the theft systematically. She said his actions showed a pattern of predatory behavior that went far beyond youthful mistakes or poor judgment. During the sentencing hearing, both twins were required to make victim impact statements. Asher seemed genuinely remorseful and apologized specifically to each family they had stolen from. He admitted that using our hot tub without permission had escalated into much more serious crimes, and he took responsibility for his actions. Cameron's statement was less convincing. He apologized but spent most of his time explaining how financial stress from college expenses had driven him to make desperate choices. Several people in the courtroom, including the judge, seemed unimpressed by his attempt to justify the thefts. Linda Jones's case is still pending. Her lawyer is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor seems less willing to be lenient given that she was an adult who enabled her son's criminal behavior. The school district has also started termination proceedings, which means she'll likely lose her teaching license even if she avoids prison time. The impact on our neighborhood has been significant. Several families have installed security systems and changed their routines after learning how extensively they were being shriveled. The Johnsons moved away last month, saying they no longer felt safe in the area. Michael and I have been contacted by a local news station that wants to do a story about the case, but we've decided to maintain our privacy. The whole situation has been exhausting enough without adding media attention to the mix. David Jones put his house up for sale 2 weeks ago. He told us he can't continue living next to the families his wife and sons victimized. He's been staying with his brother across town and only comes by to pack belongings and meet with real estate agents. Update 3, Linda Jones was sentenced to 1 year in prison last month, and the aftermath has completely changed our neighborhood dynamics. Linda's trial took place 6 weeks ago. Unlike her sons, she decided to fight the charges rather than accept a plea deal. Her lawyer argued that she was manipulated by Asher and Cameron and didn't realize the extent of their criminal activities. The prosecution countered with evidence showing she had actively participated in planning the thefts. The most damaging evidence against Linda came from her phone records and computer search history. Police found text messages between Linda and Cameron discussing neighbors' travel schedules and detailed plans for when to target specific houses. Her browser history showed searches for how long before stolen jewelry can be sold and statute of limitations for theft charges. Michael and I testified at Linda's trial along with the other families who had been victims of the thefts. It was uncomfortable facing her in court, especially since she had been our neighbor for 3 years and we'd always considered her friendly, if somewhat nosy. During her testimony, Linda tried to claim she was only trying to help her sons make friends with neighbors and build community connections. She said she never intended for the information she shared to be used for criminal purposes. The jury didn't find her explanation credible given the extensive evidence of her involvement. The judge sentenced Linda to 12 months in prison followed by 3 years of probation. She also ordered Linda to pay restitution to all the victims, which totaled over $15,000 when combined with the value of items that were never recovered and property damage from the break-ins. Linda began serving her sentence 3 weeks ago at the Women's Correctional Facility about an hour from here. David told us she's been placed in a minimum security unit but is struggling with the adjustment to prison life. He visits her once a week despite their divorce being finalized last month. Asher was released from prison 2 weeks ago after serving 14 months of his 18-month sentence. He's living in a halfway house downtown and working at a warehouse while on probation. His probation officer requires him to stay away from our neighborhood, so we haven't seen him since his release. Cameron still has 8 months left on his sentence. David said Cameron has been having a harder time in prison than Asher and has been involved in several disciplinary incidents. His release date may be extended if he continues having problems with the prison administration. David Jones's house sold last month to a young couple with 2 small children. David had to accept an offer significantly below his asking price because word had spread in the neighborhood about the criminal activities associated with the property. He moved to an apartment complex on the other side of town and we haven't spoken to him since the closing. The new neighbors, Mike and Sarah Thompson, seem nice but understandably cautious. They installed a comprehensive security system before moving in and have been slowly introducing themselves to everyone on the street. Sarah asked me about the previous owners, and I gave her a brief, factual summary of what happened without going into excessive detail. Michael and I have maintained all the security measures we installed after the initial break-in. The cameras and alarm systems have given us peace of mind, especially when we travel to our cabin or visit Michael's parents in Phoenix. We've never had any other security issues since the Jones twins were arrested. Our insurance company covered most of the costs related to the thefts and break-ins, though we had to pay a significant deductible. We also received partial restitution payments from the criminal case, but will probably never recover the full value of everything that was stolen or the emotional cost of feeling violated in our own home. The other families who were victims have had varying degrees of recovery. The Martinez family received most of their stolen jewelry back, but Mrs. Martinez told me she still checks her doors and windows multiple times each night before bed. The Johnsons' new house is in a gated community with professional security, which they said was a direct response to what happened here. Our neighborhood has definitely changed since the arrests and convictions. People are more suspicious and less trusting than they used to be. Several families have installed security cameras, and there's much less casual interaction between neighbors than there was before the Jones family's crimes came to light. Michael and I have discussed whether we want to continue living here long term. The house itself is perfect for us, and we've invested considerable money in security improvements. But the sense of community that originally attracted us to this neighborhood has been damaged, possibly permanently. For now, we're staying put. Our security measures are comprehensive, and we're comfortable with the precautions we've taken. The new neighbors seem responsible, and the other families on our street have been supportive throughout this entire ordeal. The hot tub that started this whole situation gets used regularly now. Michael and I make a point of spending time on our deck several evenings each week, partly because we enjoy it and partly to maintain a visible presence on our own property. We've never had any unauthorized visitors since installing the security cameras. Looking back on everything that happened, I'm struck by how a seemingly minor violation of our property boundaries escalated into a major criminal case that destroyed an entire family and changed our neighborhood permanently. What started as college kids sneaking into our hot tub revealed a much larger pattern of theft and deception that none of us saw coming. The Jones twins are now convicted felons with prison records that will affect their opportunities for years to come. Linda lost her career, her marriage, and her freedom because she chose to enable her son's criminal behavior rather than stopping it when she had the chance. David lost his family and had to start over completely in his 50s. Michael and I survived the experience with our property and security intact, but we learned that you can never really know your neighbors as well as you think you do. The people living next door for 3 years were running a criminal operation under our noses, and we had no idea until we literally caught them in the act.